are gonna be doing practice test number 1, but today we're gonna start with type 1. What is typically used on small appliances? The answer for number 1, and the only one that makes sense, is a straight piece of tubing that is entered using a piercing service valve. Now for this question is basically the definition of small appliances, and again, whenever you're taking the test, remember what section you're on. You're on type 1, so it's basically asking you the definition of type 1 on this question. And the definition is appliances containing 5 pounds or less of a refrigerant that have been hermetically sealed and charged at the factory. Now, for this question, it is very simple. Again, focus on what section you're doing. You're doing type 1. So, the answer for this one is very simple. The one that has type 1. So, type 1 technicians or universal technicians. That would be the answer for number 3. Question number 4. You are required to recover 80% of the refrigerant. It doesn't matter if you're using a system-dependent or self-contained recovery device. The answer for this one is either of them. The answer for this one will be either a passive or active recovery process. Number 6, the only answer that really makes sense is in here will be D, a domestic refrigerator. This one is also very easy. Or it might be easy because I already took the test. But the answer for this one is basically not in the book. It doesn't cover it. 608 doesn't cover it. It's a different certification, and it will be A, motor vehicles. That doesn't cover it, so that's a different certification. I believe that is 609 certification. So that A will be the answer for number 5. For this question, the maximum charge for a system-dependent recovery system would not be 5, it would not be 10, and it would not be 50 pounds. The answer will be 15. 15 pounds is the maximum charge for a recovery. Now for this question, basically the definition of type 1 will tell you the answer. So the answer for this question, it will be 5 pounds, because a type 1 appliance is a maximum of 5 pounds or less of refrigerant that is factory charged and hermetically sealed. So the maximum allowable charge to use a system-dependent recovery device would not be 5 pounds, it would not be 10 pounds, and it would not be 50 pounds. The answer will be 15 pounds. So looking at D and C, they say 75% of refrigerant and 95% of refrigerant. So that is completely off. Those are not the answer. And B, it says 80% of refrigerant, but the compressor is operating. Remember, when the compressor is operating, it's 90%. So B will not be the answer either. The answer for this one will be A. For this question, I want you guys to remember, when there is an inoperative compressor, it will be 80%, and 4-inch vacuum. When the compressor is operating, so an operative compressor is 90%, and 4-inch vacuum. So non-operating 80%, operating 90%, and 4-inch vacuum for both. Now for this one, there is 3 refrigerants that a refrigerator could be factory charged with. And the only one that won't be, so it will be the answer because it does say except in this question, that will be R404A. So R404A will be the answer. Is simple. If you have both sides connected at the same time, you are gonna improve the speed of recovery. So the answer is A. Is asking you why should you let the cylinder stabilize to room temperature, and the answer for this one is basic. So you need to let it stabilize to room temperature because the comparison to the pressure temperature chart will only be accurate if the pressure and temperature are stabilized. So how do you get them stabilized? They are stable. So how do you get them to be stable? You let the cylinder stabilize going into another room. So adapting to the room temperature. Before beginning refrigerant recovery procedures, it is always necessary to, you are recovering a refrigerant. So what do you want to know? The first thing that you want to know, you don't really care about anything else, is the type of refrigerant that you are recovering. How do you do that? You look at the nameplate. The nameplate will tell you exactly what type of refrigerant you are recovering, and you want to know the type of refrigerant you are recovering so you don't mix refrigerants. So the answer for this one would be B. Know the type of refrigerant that you're recovering so you can prevent contamination. So what should a technician do if they suspect the refrigerant to be contaminated? This is simple. There is a facility for that, and what you want to do is turn the refrigerant in. So you want to turn the refrigerant in for reclamation. That will be the answer for this question. So a tip for this question. To do it faster, once you see the word drop in, and I tell all of my students this, once you see the word drop in substitute, there is no such thing as a drop in substitute. So that's the answer right there. There is no such thing as a drop in substitute. If a reclamation facility receives a tank of mixed refrigerant, they may contaminate it or mix refrigerant. So the two things that they may do is, one, they may refuse to take the refrigerant in, and two, they may charge you extra. So that will be the answer for number 16. A will be the answer for number. Passive system dependent recovery process for small appliances. Must use a pressure release valve when recovering refrigerant. Only be performed on a system with an operating compressor. No, none of those make sense. The only one that makes sense in this one, a system dependent recovery process always recovers it in a non-pressurized container. So the answer for this one would be C. Question is asking you how many valves, and it's pretty simple. It will be 2 valves, one on the high side and one on the low side of the system. This one is very simple. If you have any excess fittings or anything like that, you always wanna leak test it before processing with the recovery. So the answer for this one will be A. Operative compressor in a refrigerator. What should you do? It is helpful to heat and strike the compressor with a rubber mallet. When R410A is recovered from an appliance, it should answer A and B both say can be mixed. No, you never want to mix refrigerant. You never want to do that, so those are not the answer. C needs not to be recovered. Yes, the refrigerant does need to be recovered. So the only answer for this one will be D. This question is asking you about safety. So safety, you always want to wear a multi-line gloves and safety glasses when recovering when connecting or disconnecting hoses. Should be recovered into a recovery vessel that is clearly marked so the mixing refrigerant does not occur. So the answer would be D. Question number 3, and something something helpful for question number 3, and something I found for taking this test many times is whenever there is the word regulator in the answers, that will be the answer. That's a way of looking. However, especially on this question, it's asking you what a nitrogen tank should be equipped with, and it will be a regulator. A very large refrigerant leak can cause suffocation because it is a very large refrigerant leak, so that's why it causes suffocation. But if you have a small refrigerant leaks, you're always basically gonna let out a little of refrigerant when you're connecting and disconnecting hoses. But why does it cause a suffocation when there's a very large refrigerant leak? It is because a refrigerant is heavier than air and displace oxygen. Now, question number 25, the last question. This question is very, very simple, and there's a trick I came up with that I say if you can't pronounce it, then it is probably not the answer. And it does work, that's why I say it. I'm not going to share something with you guys if it doesn't work. So if you can't pronounce it, it's not the answer. So the only one that you can pronounce is hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid. So that will be the answer for number 25. Next video, we're doing type 2-4 practice test number 1. Peace.